Hello everybody, this is Thumb Roast Coffee Podcast, specialty coffee made simple. I am Missy Bobo and I am the owner of Thumb Roast. We are here today at Ray's recording our first live podcast for us to be able to kill two birds with one stone, record a podcast and also a video for YouTube. So if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We are Thumb Roast Coffee, located in Croswell, Michigan. We try to educate the community about specialty grade coffee, and today we're going to discuss the difference between two different species of coffee, the main species that are grown, Arabica and Robusta. So I've got my trusty notes here I'm going to be referring to. First of all, there are over 120 different species of coffee. So that leaves a lot of room for discussion, which we'll get into that in later podcasts and videos. But for today, we're going to discuss the top two, which are Robusta and Arabica. Most people are familiar with Arabica beans. You hear about Arabica, oh, this is, it's all Arabica beans. Buy our coffee because it's Arabica beans, which is great because Arabica is a great plant. It's a great species. It's a great coffee. But I want to feature today the difference between Robusta and Arabica. So let's dive in. First of all, Robusta coffee makes up about between 20 to 40%. They're not exactly sure, so they say about 30% of the population, or not the population, the production of the world. And Arabica is the other 70%, which they say 60 to 80, give or take. So about 70% of the world's coffee production is Arabica, and 30 is Robusta. The main difference between the two is the flavor. So we'll start there. The Robusta plant is usually grown at lower elevations. The plant itself has double the amount of caffeine, about double, than in comparison to an Arabica bean. The Robusta plant has less sugar and it is less susceptible to pests and disease. Because it has that natural antioxidant of caffeine, it's a natural pest deterrent, so they don't have to use as much. It's a cheaper, more easily harvestable, and it's an easier product to mass produce and used in a lot of commodity grade coffee. So when you're looking at buying a coffee that doesn't say anything, if it doesn't say Arabica, it's probably Robusta. Some of the popular espresso roasts, specifically for the caffeine content, there's some large brands like Death Wish Coffee and Lavazza Coffee. Those are specifically Robusta plants. And no detriment to them because there's a market for that. Some people like that. So those are just some examples of the types of coffee that uses Robusta, the Robusta plant. So it's easier to harvest. It's grown at a lower elevation. You can get combines through there really easily and quickly. The Robusta plant is less time to maturation, so an Arabica plant is 5 to 7 years before it actually starts fruiting and you can actually get coffee from it, whereas a Robusta plant can be a lot. There's no definite time period because there's a lot of variables, but it's drastically different, 2 years to 3 years depending on the conditions. I've read an article that some people had it down to a year once it was fully developed. So the caffeine content is naturally about double than Arabica, and then you have the higher elevation Arabica, and that adds even less caffeine. So that's where that double comes in, is if it's a higher elevation grown Arabica, then it's about double the caffeine content. But if it's a lower elevation Arabica, then I think it's 2.7 milligrams versus 1.5, so almost double. The Robusta plant has a more bitter aftertaste to it by nature because of the less sugar in it. So a lot of times you'll taste a coffee and like, man, it's just bitter. Depending on what type of plant it is, it could be just roasted incorrectly. a lot of the large brand names, which again, I don't want to talk negatively about another brand, but a very widely known coffee roastery that you can buy in most stores, it has that bitter aftertaste, and they use Arabica coffee, but they use a lesser elevation, and then they use a blend, so you've got a bunch of different flavors going on, and then also they roast it really quick batches because it's more about money and pumping it out than it is about carefully crafting that flavor, which we'll get into that in a different podcast about specialty grade. But I just wanted to give you the difference between Arabica and Robusta. We only do Arabica coffee for obvious reasons. It's sweeter, it has less caffeine, it's better for you, it's better tasting, and one of the things that I did want to hit on is if you buy Arabica beans in the store, the FDA only requires that you have 10% of that product in the packaging, in the package, for you to be able to call it whatever that 10% is. For instance, Arabica coffee, if it says Arabica coffee on the bag, it only actually has to be 10%. So if it says Arabica but it's not giving you the flavor that you want, it's probably just filler, because a lot of Arabica coffees are filled with Robusta. They can say it's Arabica, and then the rest of it they just use as a filler. A lot of ground coffee, they use Robusta as a filler. But I just wanted to kind of give you that little tidbit about Robusta coffee, that so you know what you're buying. Summerose Coffee is about educating, it's about awareness, it's about fresh, clean, quality coffee, and bringing specialty grade coffee, the best coffee available, to the average person, so you don't have to use another language. At no point do I want to denigrate another business or how they do it, because there's a product for everybody. There's something for everybody. So we want to focus on the positive things that we're doing. And I hope that this reflects that. I hope you learned something today. Our next podcast is going to be about the difference between Arabica and specialty grade Arabica. And I'm very excited to show you that and explain that, because that's where we shine, is that specialty grade, that higher elevation, that higher way of getting coffee to everybody and not having to learn that other language. So again, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our podcast, soon to be uploaded on Spotify and iTunes. But right now it's available in a link in our Facebook and on our website. Thank you very much for your time. Everybody have a great day.